So let's go ahead and look at how we would write this out to give us an idea, and then we're going to practice using that ABE strategy in there. So remember, we're looking for, first of all, our first step is look at question A. We already know that we're looking at, in this case, a difference between the two historians, and we're talking about the West, okay? So let's go ahead and read through this and get a feel for what these historians are saying. So Frederick Jackson Turner says, "We have in the United States history a recurrence of the process of evolution in each Western area reached in the process of expansion. Thus, American development has exhibited not merely advance along a singular line, but a return to a primitive conditions on a continually advancing frontier line, and a new development for that area. American social development has been continually beginning over again on the frontier. This perennial rebirth, this fluidity of American life, this expansion westward with its new opportunities, its continuous touch with the simplicity of primitive society, furnish the forces dominating American character. The true point of view in history of this nation is not the Atlantic coast. It is the Great West. In this advance, the frontier is the outer edge of the wave, the meeting point between savagery and civilization." Whew, that is a flowery statement, and it probably might be a little tricky to understand. So let's look at some phrases and see if we can clue that in there. One of my favorite phrases from this is, "The true point of view in the history of this nation is not the Atlantic coast, but it is the Great West." This to me says, look, America wasn't born with the 13 colonies. They're saying, America was born in the West. This is what makes America, because, let's look at a couple things here. Okay, we develop in the West. We have beginning this over and over again. We're reborn in the West. American life is found in the West. We're expanding west with new opportunities, and those new opportunities is what makes America what it is, not the formation of the 13 colonies. So this is a pretty positive view of the West. Let's look at what Limerick says. So Limerick writes, "The history of the West is a study of a place undergoing conquest and never fully escaping its consequences. De-emphasize the frontier and its supposed end. Conceive of the West as a place, not a process. And in Western American history has a new look. First, the American West was an important meeting ground, the point where Indian American, Latin America, Anglo-American, Afro-America, and Asia intersected. Second, the workings of conquest tied these diverse groups into the same story. Happily or not, minorities and majorities occupied a common ground. Conquest basically involved the drawing of lines on a map, the definition and allocation of ownership, personal, tribal, corporate, state, federal, and international, and the evolution of land from matter to property." So let's see, what is this person saying? Well, first of all, right here it says we have to give it a new look. Okay, what do they mean from that? She says, first of all, that the West is a place. Okay, it is not a process. This person's saying, Turner's saying, look, we as America went through the process of becoming America in the West. And this person is saying it is not a process, it is a place. And it is a place where people have met, and because they have met, we have elements of conquering that have redefined the West, where conquering basically has turned the West from this place into property, and that property has created conflict. So now what we have to do is write an answer that shows that argument. So if you remember with Abe, the answer is, what is the difference? Okay, that's the answer. But because we have to describe their argument, we can't just say, they thought the West was good. They thought the West was bad. No, no, no. We have to explain why The West was blank because, what's their argument? And then B and C, we have to give some examples to back that up. So let's look at how we could write this. So this is question A. What is the answer? Well, the main difference between Turner's and Limerick's interpretation is their view on how the West was won. That's the answer. You are making a statement and it is not good enough for an argument because they're not giving a statement, they're giving an argument, and you have to describe that argument. So let's see what Turner says. Turner argues that the West is the birthplace of the United States because the West allowed the ideas of America that are held dear to grow and flourish as the area is settled. Turner has an opinion about the West, and this is his opinion, and you have to describe that opinion. And you have to do it for Limerick too. Limerick argues the West should be viewed as a place where groups of people collided because history illustrates diverse groups existing with conflict focused on places in the West and the territory that is claimed and fought over. So here's good old Abe. We have the answer. They differed on how the West was won, but we have to describe their argument, so we're going to give their reason and we're going to give their argument through the magical word because. Now questions B and C want an example. Okay, so this is going to finish off our Abe here. Okay, so let's find an example to support Turner. Okay. An example that supports Turner's idea that the West embodied the ideals of America, notice how we're going to kind of restate his opinion, would be the Homestead Act. Here's our vocabulary word that we're pulling in. All right, what is the Homestead Act? The Homestead Act allowed the government to give individuals 160 acres of land in the West for individuals who committed to stay on the land for 5 years. Individuals, such as women, who had previously been limited on ownership of land were able to participate in this program. This illustrates how the West allowed for more groups to participate in the American ideas that were not there when the country was first started. Do you feel like that event supports his argument? Now let's support Limerick's. An example that supports Limerick's argument, the West should be viewed as a place where there's been the center of conflict, would be supported by the Indian Wars after the Civil War. As the United States started to view the land through private property and ownership, this conflicted with previous inhabitants of the Native American tribes. This led to a large-scale conflict over who could reside and use the land thereof. Once again, notice how they restate the argument and give an example that's very specific that can support their argument. In our next video, we're going to have you practice this, and we're going to look at the specific structure of these questions and how we can write them using the Abe strategy.